My name is Anil Jain. I lead global strategic industries for Google Cloud. If you're working with Google, you know we have all types of titles in a very highly matrixed organization. So let me take a moment just to explain what that means. My team, and I have the best team, is responsible for helping our customers and partners deliver AI-driven industry transformation, right? We live in a time right now where AI is, of course, involved in all your businesses. You're all thinking about it, using it. Some of you are very advanced. But I think there's a point in time here where we're experiencing this pivot where industries are reimagining what their business is like, what their value chains are like. And in that mix, all of you are still operating your businesses and have to figure out how are you actually able to extract the return on investment, right, from the time, resources, and money you apply to AI. So that's what the conversation is about today. Meanwhile, I hope you're having a great Next. If any of you have met me before, you know this is not my normal voice. This is the husky, sexy voice that comes after spending 5 days in Vegas. Hopefully I won't lose my voice while on the panel. But I'm looking forward to this conversation today. Let's just start off talking a little bit about, the fact that we, of course, make big, bold statements, and I think the press is saying all these things, but the agentic enterprise is here, right? And the reality is it's just starting, but the question is, are you seeing ROI? And across the sectors that we work with, we're seeing a number of use cases that are actually delivering, quantifiable results. We did a survey. Some of you may have seen the ROI of AI report we published earlier this year. We surveyed over 3,500 executives in 24 countries across a diverse set of industries to understand, are you seeing return on investment? What does that look like? You can get the report from Google Cloud's website or talk to your contacts, we'll get it to you. But what we found is that the use cases typically include high volume, highly repetitive tasks that have a direct impact on cost savings, but they also have an impact on revenue generation and expansion, and crucially, risk mitigation, right? Making things safer, reducing risk, detecting fraud. And what's really interesting is this strategic focus at the enterprise level on tangible outcomes rather than experimentation actually defines kind of the arc of kind of AI adoption we've seen over the last couple of years, right? 2 years ago, people were still experimenting, and then they were moving into pilots, and we had like pilot purgatory, right? In your organization, you had 200 pilots running, probably a lot of AI fragmentation, but everyone was trying to figure it out. Last year, we saw a number of enterprises around the world move AI use cases into production, and now we're seeing real business value realization. In financial services, one of the many sectors that we spend a lot of time in, AI continues to help transform the customer experience. And we've already seen how it can transform kind of top of funnel interactions and queries and drive them into better outcomes, conversions, higher customer satisfaction. Now, the huge opportunity that's in front of us is actually to implement agentic systems that can address more complex tasks, that can address more nuanced questions. And the technology is there, but as with every technological shift, it's really about how do you facilitate adoption across your organization? How do you address the implementation and make it real so that you can actually get those tangible outcomes? And today we're gonna have a conversation where we get some of those insights from people who are actually doing it today. Now, in IT sectors within your organizations, AI is of course already having major productivity impacts, and it continues on an upward trend. But what's really interesting is the non-IT side of things have started, the other functions and across an organization, the lines of business have started seeing an upward trend in productivity enhancement as well. And this reflects, AI's growing role across the enterprise, across the organization. And if you think about how AI could be used, there's almost, no part of the business that will go untouched by AI. And the truth is, we believe the breadth of adoption actually is key to really unlocking the productivity and the ROI. So with that, we're going to have today a conversation with Jeff from the Hartford, Laura from Cisco, and Vince from Cathay Pacific. So please give me a hand in welcoming our panelists to the stage. We passed the first test and no one tripped coming up the stairs, so we're good. Well, thank you all for joining us today. As we discussed before, I think this is a really interesting conversation. There's been a lot of great content. I love the keynote, of course. I'm a little biased, but I think there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of great conversations I've overheard in the hallways. And ultimately what it comes down to is the discussion we're gonna have on this panel, right? There's a lot of stuff you can do as a consumer. There's a lot of things people are experimenting with, but how do you really make it real and tangible? And of course, to prioritize as leaders the investments in AI, how do you ensure that there's an ROI? So let's start off with you, Laura, and then we'll come down the way here. But just introduce yourself, your role, your company, and then just a quick comment on like how AI is being infused in your organization, and then we'll get into the questions.
Sure. So my name's Laura Rinehart. I am the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Cisco. Cisco is the world's largest food distribution company for food away from home. So we distribute food to hospitals, schools, and local restaurants. My role at Cisco is to design and execute on their global data strategy and to implement AI capabilities and workflows that will be directly aligned to our P&L. I think at Cisco, when we think about AI capabilities, and I think, Anil, I even heard you mention it in the beginning, it's really about redesigning how our business operates. And that's really where our key focus is today.
Awesome, thank you, Laura. Vince?
Thank you. Morning, everyone. I'm Vince. I work at Cathay Pacific. So Cathay Pacific is a premium airline based out of Hong Kong. We serve over 200 destinations around the globe. So we're one of the most connected airlines in the Asia-Pacific region. At Cathay, I lead product and engineering teams to build out consumer-facing conversational AI experiences. So today that means our chatbots that you can access through our native channels, so the website and the app, but also through social messaging channels, so namely WhatsApp, WeChat, and Line. So my experience to date has been around how we can really drive customer experience through generative AI experiences, and from a business perspective, it's around contact center cost optimization.
Wonderful, thank you, Vince. Jeff?
Yeah, well, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here.
And thanks for everyone who decided to skip the developer keynote to come to this session. Jeff Hawkins, I lead data, AI, and operations for the Hartford. For those of you who don't know, the Hartford is a 215-year-old insurance company. So innovation, evolution is in our DNA to last that long and evolve and change over that many years. And we provide, risk management, insurance services for employee benefits, small business, middle and large size businesses, as well as global businesses. And we also have a personal insurance line as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for joining us here. You can see a very diverse set of businesses. Let's dive into the conversation. And I think the place to start, right, obviously you guys have been seeing a lot, listening to a lot, reading a lot of articles, not just at Next, but in general. But one thing I think that's been a common theme, and I think it's true with every technological kind of transition we've gone through over the years, is that there's a requirement, it seems, for a C-level mandate or buy-in, right? And I'm not saying that is the only thing required, but while kind of bottoms up adoption is interesting and important, the mandate from the top, from the leadership team, seems to be a common theme across enterprises where they've successfully started implementing AI. So I'd love to kind of get your take on how your leadership is providing that guidance, that direction, and comment on, like, is it broad and all-encompassing, or is it specific to particular goals or that are aligned with key outcomes? We'll start with you, Jeff.
You want me to start? Well, I would say that it is definitely a leader. It's definitely driven from the top, but I think we have done a good job of activating the organization around a mission. And AI is going to play a critical role in how businesses operate in the future, no different than other shifts that we've seen with digital and the web and so forth. So that starts with our CEO, and a big part of that is modeling those behaviors in terms of how we use the tools, how we train, and the messaging around that. I think we're going to get into a little bit more on the various use cases, so I won't
sure.
go too deep into that. But we are focused on use cases that we believe provide value that's worth our time to invest in. And you hit it a bit in the beginning. I think in early phases, we were all sort of trying to figure out what this technology was. It's non-deterministic. What does that mean?
Right.
What are these different models? How do they perform? And there was a lot of experimentation. And I think early on, you sort of gravitate, particularly in a regulated industry like ours, you sort of gravitate towards lower complexity, lower risk use cases.
Okay.
And we did that and learned, but I think what we'll talk about today is how we've pivoted more to things that can create real value. So it's not a sidecar strategy.
All right, so mission aligned, focus on value creation, starting with the lowest hanging fruit and then building from there.
Yeah.
Vince?
I think I'm very aligned with what Jeff has just mentioned. This is definitely coming from a leadership perspective and coming down to our teams. I think in terms of the industry, it's kind of, we're in this moment right now, and we can't ignore it. So everyone is hyper-focused on how we can use this technology to not just benefit the customer experience, but more importantly, how do we drive business outcomes? So within my scope of this area around contact center optimization, I think a lot of companies, this is one of the obvious areas that we can optimize and automate, because there's a lot of volume here. So to give some perspective, the chatbot today receives around 50,000 sessions per week. Of that, today we automate around 50% of those. And there's a very direct line to cost optimization here, because every contact that is not contained within the chatbot has a cost, because they transfer to a human agent. And so we measure cost from two perspectives. One is the number of transfers, and then the average handling time for each of those transfers that get onto a human agent. So I think we'll get into a bit more around how we think about this problem, how we think about the customer experience and driving adoption from a customer perspective. And lastly, I think, yes, we want our bots to answer questions, but how do we really drive the agentic side of this equation to really increase the ROI that we get from this investment?
And Vince, just to build on that, because I think you're talking about the contact center, certainly the consumer experience is part of that, and then moving to agentic. But from leadership perspective, was the top-down focus that says we must use AI, and the priority is the consumer experience and addressing complexity and costs in the contact center?
So I think the priority are our business objectives. And so everything starts from the business for us. But there's a very nice and direct correlation to customer experience as well. So these things work hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so I think this is where there's a nice blend and a nice conversation that we can have around customer experience, business objectives, business goals, around adoption of this technology.
Awesome, thank you. Laura?
Sure. So being a CDO, I'm going to take a data view into the answer to that question. So absolutely at Cisco, we had a mandate, and our mandate was to redesign how our business was operating and really have an AI-first outlook. In order to do that, we knew that we needed to create a data foundation that was going to be able to help us scale with not only analytics but also AI capabilities, and so that was really the mandate. And so we concentrated on that in 2025 using 3 pillars. So the first pillar was to really start connecting and centralizing our data globally at Cisco, because we spent a lot of years acquiring companies, and so our data was very fragmented. And I'm sure a lot of companies and a lot of people, they're very common right now. And so it was really around centralizing that data. And so our first pillar was to modernize our data platform. And that was to really focus on how to get near real-time data, transactional data, loaded into the data platform. So that could empower our analytic workflows and allow them to trigger in the moment. And our second pillar was to focus on actually executing on our data governance processes and controls and policies. And so embedding data governance into our platform so that we could have consistent, trusted, secure information. And then our third pillar was to mature our analytics. So our analytics, we were very predictive, but we needed to mature that into sending alerts and recommendations to our business in order to get that adoption, so they could feel comfortable with the information and the recommendations, but still allowing that business to make that final decision, not kicking it off for them, but to make that final decision. So now in 2026, our key focus has really been enforcing that adoption with our business to now use the AI recommendations that we've provided them, and now feel comfortable with us using agentic workflows to kick that off. Yeah. And so I'll give a few examples later.
Yeah, let's dive right into that, because that's the next kind of part of this, which is the agentic leap, right? Moving into, or I guess moving from passive automation, right, to agentic operation, where you have autonomous action, you have agents that can, leverage the data, understand the workflows, reason through, the inputs, and do so at scale, but then take action, right? So why don't you go ahead and continue, Laura, on that in terms of moving into more agentic execution.
Sure. So for us to take this big leap, we needed to get our business to go beyond just capacity and thinking about efficiencies, but really thinking about AI as a growth engine that's going to drive revenue, margin, and customer service. And so, for example, our first AI workflow that we kicked off was for our district sales managers. So what we did was we automated their weekly planning sessions. So every Sunday, we have our district sales managers that work hours over multiple reports to prepare for Monday morning meetings in how to coach their sales consultants to increase performance. And so now what we've done is we've implemented a workflow and actionable insights. And those insights and recommendations can provide them recommendations like how to optimize their sales consultants' territories, recommendations on where to find the highest margin opportunities for their sales consultants, and even like which sales consultant they would need to speak to in order to increase their performance. Not the sales consultant's performance, but the performance of the sales consultant's portfolio.
Right.
And so these actionable insights can provide actions for the DSM and the sales consultant. And so some of those actions are, we can provide actionable insights, for example, how to retain a customer that we know is high risk to churn. And so we can look at patterns and feedback loops in the data and be able to tell a sales consultant that their customer is high risk to churn because maybe they've had late deliveries in the last couple weeks, or an increase in where they have received substitutions and declined them or returned them, or even their customer has requested multiple pricing adjustments. And so these are all high risk to churn actionable insights, and we offer recommendations for them, and they can kick these off in order to increase performance for the customer. And this is all embedded in our sales consultant Salesforce mobile app. So this has been redesigning how our sales consultants are now working today. And so we're using AI capabilities to reduce these, what we call low impact workloads, so that they can be more impactful in the field and spend more time working with the customer.
And ideally, your district sales managers aren't poring over reports on Sundays.
And they're not poring over reports. Okay. And we've actually been able to connect this to the P&L now. So using feedback loops, we can measure when a sales consultant chooses to kick off a workflow that we've created. And we can also measure the feedback loops. So we now actually have connected to our P&L the NBAs, or the next best actions, that we send through the, we call it our AI 360 mobile app, but through their mobile app. And now we know that we're increasing cases sold and increasing revenue based on like item recoveries or Cisco brand swap outs, and increasing and penetrating in our customers' market basket, which is common orders that they commonly order. So we've actually tied it back to the P&L, and every week we can actually measure that benefit. So it's been a huge value for the organization to be able to do that.
That's a great example. Vince, how about moving to more agentic execution?
I think the move to agentic is quite an obvious next step for a chatbot program. I think if the bot is only able to answer questions, you very quickly reach that ceiling of usefulness for a customer. And we can kind of see that today. And I'd say we're very early in that transition into agentic, as I guess many of us are. From a product vision perspective, what we're really trying to do is push on two levers to increase our bot capability. One is around the experience. So this is leaning into voice, leaning into digital humans, and how we can really create that engaging experience for our customers, especially for the next generation as well. We see that this is a trend that will be coming over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, that kind of time frame. For those that saw the Citibank presentation yesterday, a quick plug for them. I really loved that because I think that's one of the first implementations that I've seen that really hits the mark, and it's really what we're trying to drive towards.
This was the wealth management.
The wealth management, City Sky.
Yeah, City Sky.
So another plug for them. Go check it out.
A silent plug for Citibank, right?
Yes.
So that's on the experience side.
Yeah.
So our chatbot is called Vera, and the reason why she's called Vera is because that was the name of our first cabin crew when we had our first flight 80 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so we have a really nice sort of brand, persona, story to build off, and to really build that human connection with our customers. So that's the first part around the experience. And secondly is around the capability, and what we mean by this is it's really the agentic side. So how much can this bot do for you? We see that in our contact center, around 70% of our contacts are around requests to do something. So whether that's a name change, a date change, even flight bookings, or questions about the loyalty program. Where can I fly with with this number of air miles? So I think there's actually thousands of standard operating procedures within our contact center, and that is an opportunity for us that we can quite clearly tie back to the P&L. Every contact costs us as a business around $10 US. and we think of the scale of the number of conversations that we have with our customers, there's a really big opportunity there for us. So, as I say, we're very early in this journey. Very excited about the opportunity that we can build on, and I think this is something that we'll be focused on at a leadership level for the next few years.
Vince, can you repeat the cost you just said?
$10 per contact.
Per contact.
Yes.
And right now your chatbots are doing about 50,000 interactions.
So
the human call is $10, and you are doing some cost containment as a result of agent.
So the chatbot program, 50,000 conversations, around 50% of those are what we call contained. The other 50% transfer to a human agent, so that's where we get our cost.
Yeah.
On top of that, we have phone calls, so that's not within the 50,000 today. The chatbot, as a percentage of total channels, all the different channels that we serve our customers, is around 35%. So the other 70-ish% are phone calls. And so there's another opportunity there to leverage AI, not just from a chatbot perspective, but also from a phone call voice AI perspective.
And just to build on this, because I think there's many ways to measure the return on the the investment, and we talked about cost savings just now, and there's a lot of different components of a contact center execution, right? But are you measuring in any way? And if so, have you seen an impact on customer satisfaction?
So, great question. We look at this from a few different ways. One, from a customer satisfaction perspective, we do see that conversations that are more generative with customers have a higher customer satisfaction. So we measure customer satisfaction between 1 to 5, and we see 1 to 2 points of difference from our customers. From the contact center, there is a real opportunity here, not just to drive cost optimization, but also revenue uplift, so the top line. So today, around 5% of our revenue comes from a contact center, and that's through cross-sell, upsell, changing bookings. What we see is that through the reduction in average handling times, we can leverage that time to do more upsell, cross-sell, maintaining that average handling time target, which today is 15 minutes. So through saving time through AI, we can actually leverage that time to build our top line as well.
Okay, so there's multiple elements of here: bottom line, top line, customer satisfaction, which is, I think, magical actually. And we've actually seen across multiple industries, the contact center kind of component is actually a great place to drive ROI with AI. We've been doing that for years with telecom companies, which, as all of you know, don't have the best customer satisfaction ratings because you always get calls complaining, right? Jeff, let's go to the Hartford here, and I think part of this is what are the strategic kind of decisions needed to be made in order to kind of move to agentic, focus, as you said, on value.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about it with the perspective of hindsight, and I'll talk about two things that we really sort of intentionally did, and then maybe a couple things we learned along the way. So, like most, and as we talked about earlier, early stages, a lot of learning. I would say we really started to, harden our approach for scale, maybe early 25 in that time frame.
Okay.
And what we had recognized was creating these fragmented, sort of artisanal use cases that were very bespoke to a certain problem wasn't going to scale and drive the outcome we needed from an enterprise perspective. And we've all sort of been through it in our career, whether it's over-democratized business intelligence or analytics tools, or even Power Builder tools, Excel, Access.
Right.
We've come to term that now AI sprawl and AI slop.
Yeah.
So we saw that early on and realized that we really needed a platform approach to get to where we wanted to go and to manage quality and so forth. So that was something that was really intentional and the approach that we took. As a highly regulated industry, the second thing that we did, again with the benefit of hindsight, was really powerful, is we evolved our data science governance processes. We had strong routines around standard work and how we managed highly regulated models and so forth. And we knew that had to evolve with AI because of the change in the technology, the non-deterministic nature, and so forth, which included a risk framework around that, and how do we build a control plane for anything that we're doing that's agentic, to make sure that we can measure it, we can monitor it, and it doesn't go off the reservation. So that was number two. The third thing, or the first thing, that I think was the discovery aspect of this is it takes talent to do those first two things.
Yeah.
And so that became a really key part of our strategy. We recognized that we had to build and acquire new skills and new talent into the organization to help jumpstart and turbocharge that evolution. And then the other thing that I would point out, beyond talent, the fourth thing that we sort of learned along the way is, as a company, and I'm going to put my operations hat on for a moment, we had really strong ADKAR-based change management methodology. And that became invaluable to thinking through how to drive change management and change workflow, so that AI didn't become this sidecar thing that maybe you use, maybe you don't. I think AI, like any technology, is most powerful when it sort of disappears into the workflow.
Becomes invisible.
It becomes invisible into the workflow. So at that time, terms like human in the loop, human on the loop were nascent new terms. They're much more ubiquitous now, but that became very much ingrained in our change management process. So that wasn't the technology team, in my data or my AI organization or in the CIO organization. That was the operational change management practices that evolved in how to really scale and take advantage of AI. So, and then when you look at it through hindsight, technology/platform, governance, talent, change management, those are basics that we have been doing for years as technology leaders, but doing them in a new way as we learn this technology and how it operates.
Absolutely. I mean, what you just laid out could have been applied to every technical step change we've gone through. However, I want to point out that what Jeff just talked about, he said, back in 2025, and so we're now in this era where things are moving so fast, because that was so 2025, which was just a few months ago. So we're moving very quickly, and actually that takes me to where I think we should go in this conversation, which is about the human-agent partnership and the culture that is required in an organization. So let's just continue with the Hartford. What you laid out was great. Now, on the talent and change management side, no one here is impervious to the inertia of old paradigms, or established paradigms, I should say, of ways of working. And part of what the agentic enterprise and AI brings to the table, especially now, is quickly evolving opportunities to redesign, rethink, and introduce new ways of working. Right? And so how are you addressing that? Obviously the goal being that the technology becomes kind of ubiquitous and invisible, which I think is where we're headed. But how do you address the transition, the adoption, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt within your organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit about building upon our strengths, and you really have to know your organization and how to move it and what the strengths are, and then what does need to change, what does need to evolve. So let me start with, first of all, at the Hartford, our culture we view as a strategic asset. We believe it's a differentiator for us, and on a regular basis throughout the year, we gauge that with our employees. We measure it, we get feedback, and so forth. We have 95% participation in that. Our engagements are at the 90% level. And then maybe more importantly, when we look at our leadership scores around that. So these are people's direct managers. We score in the high 90s in that area. So that's an area that we've built a lot of trust with our employees.
It sounds like there's a lot of trust, period, in the organization, which
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier to drive change.
That's right. So the first piece is you have to have that trust
Yeah.
with your employees. And then when we actually added a question on excitement around AI and adoption of AI. And this is an enterprise-wide. This is not in a technology organ. We're in the 80%
Wow.
around
Positive.
a positive.
Oh, really interesting.
Positive sentiment around that. So that has been building upon what is a strength, a transparent, open culture where we communicate with our employees. I mentioned change management as a strength of ours, and I think that is really key in terms of evolving, the human in the loop capabilities and so forth. And what that meant is we have a change-hardy operations organization that has sort of gone through this with digital and view AI as sort of another extension of the omni-channel and an opportunity to meet customers where their evolving service needs are. So we've really built upon that. It's not a fear per se that if we roll out more digital, we're going to take less calls. It's not a fear that if we provide AI capabilities as customers more expect that from us. That's sort of ingrained into our change management processes of we meet the customer where they are. And we've done that for a number of years, and our employees are comfortable with that. So we built upon that with from an AI perspective. And then the third that I think maybe is most important is we rolled out an enterprise-wide AI literacy strategic workforce transformation program where we defined how roles are going to change, what are the skills of the future, and really made it where this is all of us coming along. We're going to invest in upskilling and so forth. So if you build upon trust, you create safe space to drive change, and then you communicate and show through your actions that you're bringing people along and you're investing in them. I think those are the sort of three key ingredients that have worked well for us. Now, like anyone else, there's still challenges. We're balancing how do we run the day-to-day business while introducing a lot of change. How fast do we go? We probably don't have that exactly right. We have to trim the sails every now and then and figure that out. And how do I find time to do the upskilling and do my job and manage the change that's coming? So it's not perfect. We're still managing through those things, but it's a transparent and communicative culture on how we approach it.
That sounds amazing. We could probably do an entire session just on that. Quickly, let me go to Laura and then Vince to address this cultural piece, and then if we can just leave enough time for a lightning question at the end, that'd be great. Laura?
Sure. I love your term, Jeff, change hardy. That's great. So I think at Cisco for us, we have some key focuses on, we have migrated or transformed from project-based delivery to product-based. So we have continuous teams now, our teams that are now dedicated across our domains that are continuously designing and building and operating these data products rather than just implementing them and putting them on the desk to support. We've also adopted agile methodologies and practices like SAFe and PI planning. So PI planning has allowed us to directly link all of our AI initiatives to business outcomes. And then I would say also one of the third important thing that we've done is we've also initiated an AI academy. And so we're evolving roles where data scientists now are becoming applied AI engineers. We've introduced new roles like content engineering. So that AI academy has really helped us evolve and grow our skill set internally at Cisco.
Fascinating. Vince?
I think building upon the point about change management, I think as a leadership team, we really have to spearhead this movement and really lead by example. And that means getting your hands dirty. new models come out all the time, new capabilities are launched, keeping your fingers on the pulse about what's happening. I think only through doing that can we have the meaningful conversations with our teams who are working with these challenges day to day. So I think that's the first thing. Second thing is that from a travel perspective, it's quite an emotional industry. If you think about when you've had your flight disrupted or your flight's been cancelled, and so from a human in the loop perspective, we'll always need our agents, our human agents, to speak directly with customers. And so that's a really important point that we really drive home, is that yes, we're looking at AI to help us with cost optimization, but this really helps it augments your experience, and we know that our customers still want that human connection with our brand. And so I guess that's the second point to really push home with our AI programs. And then lastly, onto the point around experimentation. So these technologies are changing all the time, and to build upon Laura's point, we're really encouraging our product teams to be as agile as possible. So we give them outcomes to drive, not outputs or solutions to deliver against. And this points towards a way of operating our product teams and really giving them the flexibility to drive and solve problems for our business. And it's sort of a change in mindset for how we deliver digital experiences for our customers.
Wonderful. You all have been wonderful. This has been a great conversation. I know we could keep it going. We've got 20 seconds left. Lightning round, one bit of advice you could give to this crowd here in a sentence or a phrase. Laura?
Sure. Mine would be break away from your dashboards. If you continue to allow your organization to look in the past, your AI is just going to be incremental, and you're never going to be able to get that real cross-functional value.
Vince?
I think for me, it's enjoy the ride. Right? This is a wave. This is a big wave, one of the biggest, and there will be more that are coming. So just, this is a moment in the industry, and just enjoy it.
And Jeff, finally with you.
I think what I would say is the technology is going to continue to evolve. We'll figure it out. Maybe the most important thing to focus on is the people. It's the change management. How do you bring the organization around, forward? How do you invest in the skills? I think that's the key. And then the customer. No one wants to be pushed a chat bot or any other AI solution that's trying to quote unquote contain them. I think we've all had that experience. So start with the customer, work back, and figure out how it creates value, and the rest will follow from there.